And now, brothers and sisters, to continue our rejoicing on the Sabbath day, we have the awesome opportunity to hear from the great Kohan, Michael Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Oh boy. Today, I'm going to give you a title. I don't usually do that, but today's a little different circumstances for me too. But the title is The Tree of Life. Coincidence? Question mark? I think not. The Tree of Life. Coincidence? I think not. I'm going to lay a little groundwork for you here. If you go to Psalm 52, Psalm 52, verse 8. But we are like green olive trees in the house of Yahweh. Green olive trees. We trust in your mercy, O Yahweh, forever and ever. That's what makes us different from the world. We trust in Yahweh. Okay, verse 9. We will praise you forever because you have done this. In your name, in your authority, in your character, we will hope. For your name is righteous. And we will praise you forever in the presence of your saints. In the presence of your saints. That's the reward of the righteous, right? To dwell together in unity. Turn over to Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Look at verse 13. Proverbs 3:13. Proverbs 3, verse 13. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom. Now, if you have to find wisdom, that means you have to search for it, right? So you find wisdom. Now, jump down to verse 16. Proverbs 3, verse 16. Length of days is in her right hand. Now, the her is talking about wisdom. It's personifying wisdom. So, length of days is in the hand of wisdom. And in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. That's how you get true peace, is through wisdom. She, or wisdom, is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Okay, a tree of life. Blessed are those who hold fast to her. And verse 19. Yahweh by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. See, he knew that the heavens were necessary for the survival of earth. Proverbs 11, verse 30. Proverbs 11. Turn over to Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11, verse 30. Proverbs 11, verse 30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. Okay, now we're talking about righteousness and fruit to this tree of life. Remember what Yeshua said. Turn over to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. And look at verse 17. Matthew 7, verse 17. We're going to read 17 through 20. Matthew chapter 7, verse 17. It's on page 733. Matthew 7, verse 17. Likewise, every righteous tree brings forth righteous fruit. But a tree of evil brings forth iniquity. Verse 18. A righteous tree cannot bring forth fruit of iniquity. It's impossible. It can't do it. Nor can a tree of evil bring forth fruits of righteousness. You can't mix the two, right? Verse 19. Every tree which does not bring forth righteous fruit is cut down and cast into the fire. Verse 20. Therefore, by their fruits you shall know them. By their fruits you shall know the one who is sent. Okay? Turn over to Exodus chapter 27. Exodus 27. In Exodus 27, Now, a righteous tree cannot bring forth evil. That's the reason why the olive tree was used for the lamp, the oil that went into the lamps. Okay? The lamp oil. It was taken from the olive tree. In verse 20, it says, "Command the children of Israel to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so the lamps may be kept burning continuously." Okay, it's olive oil. But notice, it's pressed olives. Now, I want you to think about this. The word pressed, it means beaten. It means beaten even violently. Okay? And of course, whenever they would shake the trees and beat them with rods and stuff and knock the olives down. So it means to beat violently. And you think about, pastor was given to reproaches. And yet, even though pastor is given to reproaches, he continues to bring forth the golden oil. Now, we must use that wisdom, okay, to let our light shine. Remember what Yeshua said? Yeshua said, "Let your lights be burning bright." Okay, and in order to be burning bright, it's got to have the oil in it, all right? Now, if you think about an example of the oil lamp, you have a receptacle, which is our body, our minds. You have the oil that's inside that receptacle, which is the golden oil, the teachings that come forth from the one that is sent. You could just light the oil, I guess, if you want it, but you'd have a mess. In order to have true light, you need a wick. And you put the wick in there. And the wicks, usually, like in the temple area and stuff, they were used from linen, which is the pure holiness of the righteousness of the saints of Yahweh, the white linen. But they would use the wicks. And you put the wick into the oil, and the wick sucks up the oil. It draws the oil out. And that's like us. We have to draw that golden oil, that teaching into us, and be lit on fire for Yahweh and shine forth the light. We can have all the oil that you want, but unless your oil is burning bright, it's of no use, right? It won't bring forth any light at all. Keep that in mind, because this light is what we see in these last days. Now, Pastor called me a couple of days ago and asked me about something, and asked me to write something up. I wrote it up and sent it in, and he said, "Well, could you bring a sermon on it?" So I said, okay. So it's a little different because I have to a little bit talk about some things here, but Yahweh willing, we'll make it through. This is called the Tree of Life picture. I'll give you a little background. Thinking back, I remember that I would many times see the picture in my mind, and I'd even draw the same picture on paper sometimes because I liked it. And what it was the House of Yahweh represented as the Tree of Life, as is mentioned in Genesis, right? And I really enjoyed Pastor sermons when you talk about the Tree of Life and the House of Yahweh. And so sometimes I would draw this picture of an olive tree on top of, you remember the sanctuary that's in town right now, the press room. You remember it has the front has the rectangular thing, and it's got the 4 columns, right? I would draw the press room, and I would draw an olive tree on top of the press room. I can remember that I would make large, like, roots on it, hanging down on it. I didn't know at the time what roots symbolized, what it represented, but the symbol it always had a meaning to me, and I just didn't know why. I just didn't know why I liked it so much. Now, on the morning of 5/29/2010, that was a Sabbath. I came to the sanctuary to work before services, and I felt this very strong urge to work on this picture. And so I immediately began to turn on the computer and opened up Photoshop, and I manipulated 2 pictures of clouds that I had. I mixed them together, and then I added in a picture of an old olive tree that was actually made up of two different trees, two olive trees. And I made it look like it was, like as if they were wrapped around one another, as we see in the design of the menorah right now, okay, and that's used in Yahweh's Last Days house. And once I got to a certain point, I named the picture the Tree of Life. And I put the olive tree on top of the front of the older western entrance to the sanctuary that's used today, which is in the west over here. Today it's used by the priests as they enter into the sanctuary on the west side there. Because I felt I had a strong urge to make sure that the words, the house of Yahweh, was up there. And so it would stand out underneath the tree, the house of Yahweh. And I thought, well, the two trees represents the work of Yahweh's two witnesses. And underneath them is the house of Yahweh, which when they ministered together, they established the house of Yahweh together. And I remember it was hard working to stop working on that picture that morning, because I thought, well, I got to, service is coming up. We got to go to services, got to get ready with the other stuff. So I had to stop and do the things that we used to do before services to get ready. So I put it away and I went about my duties, but I couldn't stop thinking that there was something about that picture. I thought, well, maybe it could be used for the cover of Prophetic Word magazine. So I sent in a copy, but as day passed after day, which turned into months and so forth, it was never used. It just wasn't meant to be, okay? And, however, I still had this nagging urge about this picture. And I had to use it some way to show it to the public, I felt, for some reason. So ever so often I would think about it, and then I had this urge to open up the file and add to it and enhance it, and then I don't know why I liked the picture so much, but I did. So I'd work on it and I'd put it away. In fact, I liked it so much I have it on my cell phone. That's my wallpaper, okay? And it says the words Tree of Life across it. But so I thought, well, okay, the feast is coming up. The Feast of Passover was approaching, the year 2011. So I had to start thinking about introduction to the next House of Yahweh prophetic film that would be shown. And so during that time, I thought, well, what if I take the picture of the Tree of Life and I add some movement to it and use it to introduce as an introduction to show the House of Yahweh? So I did. Now, the prophetic film would be based, that prophetic film was based on the theme, the Song of Israel to Yahweh and Yeshua. Remember that? Pastor sang that song, and it was released at the Feast of Unleavened Bread 2011. And it was that film that was shown, that's when the picture of the Tree of Life was shown for the first time to the congregation. Now, at this particular feast, we had 3 different films that were shown about this one inspired song that Pastor sang. And it was shown on this film, the Passover film here, was shown, the one where the Tree of Life was shown. It was shown on the last night of the feast, which was after sunset of the Roman 4/24, 2011, which actually made it the last day of the feast, which would have been the 21st day of Yahweh's first month. Now, I don't know how these numbers play or whatever, but I noticed there's a lot of 3s, there's a lot of, there's 12s, and like this 21st and so forth. There's a lot of numbers of Yahweh that pop up. Now, the second time the Tree of Life was used is when it appeared on another House of Yahweh prophecy film, which was Pentecost 2011. Now, it was at that feast that, if you remember, the young female saints and the young male saints got together and they sang the Song of Israel. Remember that? I remember that very vividly because Pastor came out to give his sermon and he was so choked up. And he said, it's so beautiful that the way the children sang that song, and he made a comment. He said, I want to put that on the satellite TV so the whole world can hear it. You remember that? And he also said, Feast of Pentecost 2011 was my best feast ever. Okay? And I thought about that statement, what he said, and I couldn't put it out of my head, so I said, I got to get that done. I got to do that for him. So I began to put together a short film which included the children singing this song along with the words of our beloved pastor. saying that this was his best feast ever. And that's the one where it shows him singing and stuff. And I again inserted the tree of life, introduction to that short film, and sent it in for approval, and it got approved, and he put it on the satellite. That's what he was looking for. So, he put it on the satellite for the whole world to hear that awesome message that's revealed in the Song of Israel. And that's what he desired to do. Now, this was the film that was playing when Pastor saw it when he was talking on the phone, remember? And he said, that's it. That's the shape of the cloud. When he saw the donkey looking at the cloud. Okay? And that was the third time that it had been shown. And soon the Feast of Tabernacles would be coming around. So I said, okay. I remember I was working on the prophetic film for the feast, and that was on the day of 9/25/2011, which was, I don't know why, but it was, I wrote this down, but it was 1 year and 120 days later, okay, from the time that I first started on it. And then I got a call from a Kohan who's responsible for making and hanging the banners in the sanctuary, and he asked me, could I get a copy of the picture of the tree, just the tree, okay, because he said, I'm working on a project. Well, later on, that project is the one that we see hanging in the sanctuary, marking the event of the sign from heaven of Pastor seeing the donkey in the clouds. Now, since all I needed was a tree, I opened up the computer program and I removed the rest of the sanctuary. And I gave him a copy of only the tree. Now, when I looked at the picture, I thought there's something interesting about it because it had the appearance of just floating in the air. You see that one? It's just floating in the air without any of the bright white clouds. Remember the bright white clouds that are around it? Here, there's no clouds. Now, I didn't think about the fact that in the original picture that there were actually three clouds that surround the tree. Yet it was 3 days later that Yahweh's seventh new moon came about. When it did, the sky was dark. It was dark with the clouds, remember? And there was a particular shaped cloud that appeared in the sky that had the shape of the tree silhouette that Pastor saw, that he would see next whenever he see the sign in the heavens. Now, we didn't know why it was dark. We thought, man, can't see the moon. We didn't realize it. Pastor did see it, and he did make mention of it, so everybody heard him say that he had seen the moon. And also, he saw that cloud. He saw the shape of that cloud that he would see in the sign from heaven. And it's interesting to note that in the first compiling of the picture of the tree, it was facing west, which is this way, toward the old entrance. And that's the exact direction the pastor was looking at. He was looking at the west to see the shape of the cloud that he would later see in the sign of heaven, while he was looking for the seventh new moon over a year later. Now, once the sanctuary was remodeled in certain areas, okay, you can no longer see the words "the House of Yahweh." That was off of there, and it was taken down, and on the old entrance, and so the picture was changed. And changed the picture to the tree on the south side of the sanctuary. So you could see the parking lot. It was facing towards the parking lot over the new House of Yahweh sign. Later on, when the newer Abelin House of Yahweh sign was put into place, I changed it for the third time, which was the one that says Abelin. That was changed for the third time. Now, at the time, I just thought, well, it just needed to be done so it'd be in the right place. But now I see that it was put there to face the same direction where Pastor was looking at when he was looking at the clouds and he saw the donkey in the cloud, when he saw the sign from heaven. He was looking towards the north. And the tree had been repositioned on the south side facing him. Now, is all this coincidence? I think not. Pastor always shows excitement. He always shows his faith in Yahweh and his faith in Yeshua when he talks about this. And it's an encouragement to us. And all I can say is thank you, Father Yahweh, for allowing us to come to this point in time in prophecy, because now we know that the tree-shaped cloud that the donkey with the backpack that was tethered to, and it was so intently looking at, was indeed the olive tree. And I thank Yahweh, and I praise Father Yahweh, as I know every one of his seed does, for our beloved overseer, the olive branch, which is Yahweh's last day's tree of life. Now, interesting notes about this sermon that's dated 5/29/2010. I grabbed my book of Israel and started looking through it. And I took the numbers 529, since it was 5/29/2010. I took 529, I looked up in Strong's, and the word means established. The word Strong's means established. At number 529, it means established, trusty or trustworthy, right? Faithful and true. Okay? Then I took the year 2010, and in Strong's it means permission of rest. Permission of rest. Remember that word, rest. Now, I didn't put it up there, but Brown, Driver, and Briggs means a day of rest. A day of rest. A giving of rest. You remember, Pastor taught us how he is our gift. He gave us the gift of knowing how to keep the Sabbath day. His teachings. And then it also means holiday, which of course should be holy day for us. Okay? Now, this seems to point to the fact that being established is being faithful, and being faithful and trusting in the Sabbath rest that Yahweh has given unto us. Okay? Now remember, I said it was hard to break away to hear the sermon. Not that it was hard to break away to get away from to get to the sermon, but it was just some reason it was kind of hard to stop working to go to the other things I had to do. The word that forms the letters 529, they form this word here. Here's the 5, the 2, and the 9. This is the Hey, the Bet, and the Teth. Okay? It forms that word, 529. In the Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament, Julius first, page 510, it shows that it means to slaughter cattle, particularly for eating. All right? Generally to cook and to prepare the principal meal. At the bottom, you see it means to slaughter, a slaughterer or a butcher. A slaughterer or a butcher. Well, where do you slaughter and where do you butcher? Slaughterhouses, right? On page 233, in verses 39 to 43, Pastor gave a warning, and this was on the date 529. He gave a warning that speaks about the slaughtering of cattle and how the slaughterhouses of the world contains death. Coincidence? It's the same word that's used in number 529. Tabak. On page 235, verse 61, Pastor said this. Now, on the phone, when he was talking, he says, I don't remember when I said it, what day that was that I said about the tree. And what he said was, on 529 is when he said it. The same day that the Tree of Life picture was made. And the House of Yahweh, kept growing, he says. You know, it kept growing slowly like an oak tree to what we now have. A tiny oak tree, but it's going to get big. A tiny oak tree, okay? And notice, it's like an oak tree. Now, although we're located on Oak Forest Road, notice it doesn't say it was an oak tree, but it says it's like an oak tree. Like an oak tree. Open up to Jeremiah chapter 17. Jeremiah chapter 17. Jeremiah 17, verse 7 and 8 says, Blessed is the man who trusts in Yahweh, and whose house is Yahweh. For he will be like a tree. Notice he said that. We were going to be like an oak tree. Like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots. Remember I told you about the roots? The root system, I would always draw it like large. By the river. And will not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It will not be worried in the year of drought. Year of drought? Didn't we have a drought recently? And never ceases to yield its fruit. That man, of course, that's blessed, of course, is Israel Hawkins. Okay? Turn over to, for your notes, you can write down Psalm chapter 1, Verse 1 through 3, I'll just read it real quick, but turn over to Isaiah 65. I want you to read that one. Isaiah 65. Psalm 1 goes right along with Jeremiah 17 here and says, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the unrighteous, for he nor stands in the seat of the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful." Verse 3 says, "But he will be like a tree." There's that phrase again, like a tree. And whatever he does will succeed. Now in Isaiah 65, it says, Isaiah 65, look at verse 22. Isaiah 65, verse 22. Isaiah 65, verse 22. "They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree, so will the days of my people be. And my elect will long enjoy the work of their hands." Verse 23. "They will not labor in vain, nor bring forth children in trouble. For they are the seed of the blessed," and we could probably insert the word "one" there. "We are the seed of the blessed one of Yahweh," the one that Yahweh sent, Israel Hawkins, "and their offspring with them." Now remember, he says, we're growing like a tiny oak tree. Okay? The reason why the oak is so well liked is because it's such a strong tree. And overall, the tree is very strong. It's a sturdy wood. And it usually shows a concept of longevity and wisdom. Now, some oak trees are known to be like over 800 years old. 800 years old. That's pretty old. But notice he said like a tiny oak tree, which means it's small and is growing. Now, with a possible lifespan of thousands of years, individual olive trees, because he says it's like an oak tree. Wasn't an oak tree, but like an oak tree, he said. With a possible lifespan of thousands of years, individual olive trees have been seen in not only generations, but entire kingdoms come and go on the face of this earth. And the olive tree is a very hardy, drought, disease, and fire-resistant tree. It can live to a great age, and its root system is robust and is capable of even regenerating a tree, even though the ground structure has been destroyed. It can still grow. And the older an olive tree is, the broader and the more gnarled the trunk appears to look. And many olive trees, and if you look in the picture it does show really a gnarled roots and trunk of the tree. But many olive trees in the groves around the Mediterranean are said to be hundreds of years old, while an age of 2,000 years is claimed for a number of individual trees, and in some cases that's been scientifically verified. But according to a recent scientific survey, there are dozens of ancient olive trees throughout Israel aging from 1,600 to 2,000 years old. And ancient trees include 7 giant olive trees in the Galilee region, which have been determined to be over 3,000 years old. Now, over the years, the olive's been symbol. Turn over to Psalm 128, verse 3. 128. Over the years, the olive has been the symbol of peace, wisdom, glory, and fertility, power, and purity. And these are things that Yahweh promises to give us, peace, wisdom, glory, fertility, power, and purity. Now, when I'm talking about fertility, I'm not talking about the fertility worship, because, I'm talking about what Yahweh promised us in Psalm 128, verse 3. It says, "Your wife will be like a fruitful vine at the sides of your house, and your children will be like olive plants around your table." They'll be perfect little saints. The last thing he showed, now this is Pastor Sermon 529. In closing, in verse 65, he says, "I call heaven and earth as witnesses," because everything that's going on in the heavens concerning heaven and earth is being written down in heaven and earth concerning the house of Yahweh. So a book is being written for us, okay? It's actually being written for us, and all these things are being written down. Now the word heaven actually means where the clouds are. That's the word it means, the sky. Okay? It actually means the sky. The last thing, now remember the word rest. All right, in Strong's 2010, the word 2010 meant rest or permission of rest. So permission is being given to someone, and that someone is the body of people. On page 238, verse 105, in closing, Pastor says, "And only you right now are being offered that rest." And he said, "The rest that I will bring forth in the last days will be glorious, because it's like Yahweh's rest." May Yahweh bless you, brethren. And with that, I'll close. And I'll turn it over to the great Kohan Safani.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated, and the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We have a few news stories this morning, and the first one is about Syria and how they're calling for a Libya-style no-fly zone. And once they do this, of course, they can enforce a Libya-style no-fly zone on Syria with ease, because the United States has what's called air dominance in the area, meaning if they decide no planes are going to take off, no planes will take off. And keep in mind that this is exactly what the pastor is talking about, the 1/3 of man over a fourth part of the earth in and around the Great River Euphrates, because Syria is right on the Great River Euphrates. It runs right through Syria. Then they're going to also have, they have massive troop movement to Israel. The United States is putting thousands of troops, and they're calling it a deployment in this story, into Israel to run these anti-missile defense systems, which the commentators are saying is an indication that Israel is about to attack Iran, and they want to have the United States there to run the anti-missile systems that will hit the Iranian missiles as they approach Israel, and they'll hit them actually in the stratosphere. So also keep in mind the use of the superlatives in these stories, such as the greatest force they've ever deployed, the first time they've ever done these things, because this matches what Yeshua Messiah said as a time of trouble that greater than has ever been. So you're going to see these superlatives used in these news stories. So let's play the film.
Pay close attention. What you are seeing today is fulfilling Bible prophecy. Welcome to YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and explained by Yisrayl Hawkins. Katan, we see Syria is in the news again this week, having more protests taking place.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like peace is anywhere in sight in Syria, and in fact, looks like they're reaching a breaking point very soon here. In fact, in recent news, RT reported that Syrian opposition has rounded an Arab League mission on violence in the country and is urging the UN to enact a Libya-style no-fly zone. One of the reasons for this move by the opposition is because they accuse the Arab League mission for covering for President Assad's regime for suppressing protesters. This particular group of observers, based in Cairo, Egypt, dismissed the claims of being persuaded by either side and stated that the claims were preemptive.
On the other hand, the League claims in its defense that it has made Damascus compromise into pulling tanks from civilian areas and to release 3,000 prisoners in recent weeks. Now, from the website alternativerights.com, Richard Spencer stated that the Syrian opposition is following after the Libyan opposition movement by utilizing the foreign military forces to help advance itself.
He also stated in an interview concerning the Syrian government that this was a move to make a deal with the United States and use their military power to topple the Syrian government, and that the UN is a tool of the global American order. Spencer also said that once the no-fly zone was in effect, that would result in regime change, war, and rebels being lifted to a new position after their enemy is taken out.
Now, as the Great River Euphrates is drying up, military actions in this area keep heating up. The U.S. is now moving thousands of its troops to Israel for a planned joint exercise. This comes after tensions increased in the Persian Gulf when Iran threatened to block the critical Hormuz Strait. Now, keep in mind, about 14 tankers carrying 15.5 million barrels of crude oil pass through the strait on an average every day.
Some analysts voice fears this troop movement could be the buildup to a military strike on Iran. This comes at a particularly sensitive time in the region, as the American President, Barack Obama, has signed into law sanctions that will make it very difficult for countries to buy oil from Iran. The EU is also considering imposing sanctions against Iranian oil exports by the end of January. The Iranian currency dropped to a record low after the American president signed into law those sanctions.
The Israeli military is reporting that it will be holding its biggest military drill ever with the United States. And what's important to note is that we're not talking here of only a military exercise. We're talking about the deployment of thousands of American troops into Israel. This joint exercise will be testing various anti-missile systems against both rockets and other missiles.
The Iranian officials are saying that they believe this is the latest and most blatant sign that Israel is planning to attack Iran and attack it sometime soon. Israel has denied this claim, and their announcement of this joint exercise comes just 10 days after the Iranians held their own military exercise near the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran's response to these sanctions and troop movement is increased threats to close and block the oil trade through the Hormuz Strait. They've also warned the American naval presence in and around the Persian Gulf. Also, Iran is preparing to continue its own naval exercises. Now, these are all part of a series of exercises that have been dubbed the Great Prophet. And that, my dear friends, has people in that region as well as the international community very concerned.
Well, for further details, we're going to join our correspondent Larry McGee, who has been researching further developments on this, and he'll give us a little update on this. Larry?
Thanks, Katan. Thousands of American troops are suiting up for arrival in Israel at present, and what the Obama administration and military officials are officially announcing as an exercise. This, however, comes on the heels of mounting tension between the U.S. and Tehran and follows a public statement recently issued by Israel declaring its readiness for war with Iran. To offer insight as to where this is all headed, Jamil Abdi, policy director for the National Iranian American Council, interviewed for RT News, argues that the inevitable conclusion of the tit-for-tat maneuvers demonstrated by Iran's exercise in the Straits of Hormuz and America's joint exercise with Israel is war, and that those arguing any different at this point haven't much sensible ground to stand on. In Mr. Abdi's analysis and those who share his perspective, the American-Israeli Iran must conform with no compromise approach leaves little room for anything other than confrontation, and the contingent being deployed to Israel by America is in preparation for that. As to the question of whether or not America, despite its heightened presence, will nonetheless attempt to occupy a backseat role and allow Israel to launch and take credit for any strike, Mr. Abdi concluded by stating that Iran's position is that any attack by Israel will be considered an attack by America. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan, Jeff, back to you.
Wow, thank you very much, Larry. Amazing. Stay tuned. Up next is another exciting sermon by the overseer Yisrayl Hawkins as he explains Bible prophecy. For YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thanks for watching.
Everyone please stand. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins!
Shalom, everyone! Come on, come on. Beautiful, beautiful. You may be sick. Oh, what do we got here? What do we got? Signs. What's the signs? Beautiful, I think. I'm having trouble reading them from here. Pass them up. Pass them up to me. You may be seated, and I'll may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I've got a lot to cover here today, and we won't cover it all, but that you got to remember what the great Kohan Michael Sheets Hawkins brought out, because I'm going to add to it here this morning, and it shows you that Yahweh, you know, had everything planned out and guiding us, guiding you, and he's just showing you that his actions are these actions we're seeing, the things we're seeing. You know, he's in full control of these things and bringing them about. Now, I've got a number of articles, but I'm going to wait till next week. But there is one here. If you saw the Brownwood Lake and the way it's drying up, oh boy, mad cow disease spreading big time. And they said they were going to start using recycled water. Here it is, right here. Recycled water that the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality approved a controversial proposal from the city of Brownwood. Imagine drinking a glass of that. You know, you might get it close enough to smell. But believe it or not, there's a prophecy. I'll bring it to you next week, Yahweh willing, that says he's going to give them urine to drink. Since they didn't like their blessings, then let them be taken from them, King David said. And of course, that's the shoes that they're wearing right now, and we'll have to see how long they're willing to wear these before they repent. But Yahweh has shown that there is a group that's going to repent. The reason I wanted the great Kohan Michael Sheets Hawkins to bring this, I found out that he's the one that drew the picture. I first thought it was the two Heiler brother Kohans that drew it and put it together with a computer, and I think that's what I said in one of the sermons. But then I find out that he had been inspired to do this years ago and was still working on it. And so I said, "You're the one that's got to draw this." Now, in May the 29th, the great Kohan Michael Sheets Hawkins drew the picture of the olive tree. Now, that was when, of course, when I think that was his last time to draw it. He thinks that was the date just before the Passover that he used, and of course later that tree was used in the along with the children singing the Great Commandment. Now on June 8th, you've got to get all this, then you've got to see how Yahweh did it for you. On June the 8th, the tree was put on top of the sanctuary about Pentecost 2011, shown while children are singing the Great Commandment. On August the 25th was when I saw, when Yahshua showed me, the donkey cloud. It was a magnificent sight, and when I first glanced up and saw that donkey, it's easily to recognize that it was a donkey, and it was very plain, very distinct. I thought, yeah, this is how Mary gets her pictures up there. But the cloud wasn't moving, and it just sat there. And I got to looking at it, and I said, no, this is not like Mary uses. This is of Yahweh, I said. And I saw the details of this donkey, and plus the pack on her back, or his back, and her ears pointed forward and her head raised up like she is staring at this cloud in front of her. And this was over the homestead where I went back and checked it out later, and sure enough, it's over the homestead and reached to the west and then back to the east a long way, just totally covering the House of Yahweh property. So, all of this adds up. But the things I'm going to show you it even gets better. But that was on the 25th of August. The 25th, when I saw this, and then I told you about it on the 27th of August, 2011, told the whole house of Yahweh on that Sabbath day. The 28th, the artist started working on this picture, on a picture for the donkey cloud. On the 28th, that's when I turned 77 years old. was on the date they started working on that cloud. That'd probably add into that thing too. Now, they were able to get the donkey pretty close to right, but they were having trouble with the clouds. And they would bring it once a week, and I would look at it and I'd say, "No, it's not like that. It was like, you got to take this out, put something else here." They would take it back and redo it. Took them about a week. I think they was getting aggravated with me, but I said, "We've got to get this right. This is coming from Yahweh and Yahshua, and we've got to get it perfect and present it to the people." So we kept sending it back and getting it back, and I'd, no, this is not right. But anyway, we kept working on it. Now, on the 28th was when they were working on this donkey. Now comes, we're still working on it, but there comes September 28th now. From August 28th to September 28th. Still working on it. And here comes the Feast of Trumpets. That's the 28th of September. Now, the night before, we were watching for the new moon. And sundown would start that day, the feast. The night before. The feast was, the 28th was the night we watched, the day before the new moon. Then the feast was September the 29th, was the Feast of Trumpets. Now, that night was cloudy, really cloudy. And we were watching intensely because it was a very important new moon. We were all up on top of the sanctuary, older priests, younger priests, everyone. And I thought I saw the moon, and I said, "I think I see it," but I could only see a portion of it in the cloud. About that time, the phone rang, and a very faithful watcher of the new moon says, "I've spotted the new moon." And I said, "Well, I think I see it, but it's cloudy here." And I said, do you see the clouds? And they said, "Yes." I said, "Tell me exactly where you see it in the clouds." Now, I didn't know what was taking place at that time and didn't even think about it. But if it hadn't have occurred like it did occur, this person would have seen the new moon, but they never would have studied the cloud around it. And the cloud, the cloud was the important thing that night. And when this person was trying to tell me where it was in the cloud, then they were describing that cloud, and they were looking at that cloud very closely, and it was put in their memory. Because it didn't make sense what was taking place then, like it does now after we find out months later. But Yahweh put it in that person's mind to look at that cloud and describe to me where the moon was. And I said, "Yes, that's it. I see it. I can't see all of it, but I see part of it." That was the night of the Feast of Trumpets. Now, we were still trying to get the cloud down that I saw on the 25th. It was after this new moon that I saw the tree on top of the sanctuary sign. While at the studio doing my mail, getting ready to do a show, prophetic word show. Now, I'm not sure about this next date. And I don't know if I can actually prove it, but I know that I did talk about it to you, so we've got to have that in a sermon. I brought it the very next Sabbath and told you that I saw this tree, and I recognized that that tree was actually the cloud in front of the donkey that I saw on the 25th. Because I'd been trying to describe this cloud to the artist, so I had the cloud firmly fixed in my mind, and when I saw this tree, I said, "That part sticking out towards the donkey, that's it. That's the same thing that's the cloud that I saw in front of the donkey." Now, it even gets better. Well, this, I don't know this date, but we're going to get the date. Not sure of it. I think it was October 1st. And I called Eliah Hyler first, and Kohan Eliah Hyler Hawkins first to tell him. And he said, tell him of this cloud and the donkey and being like the tree on top of the sanctuary. That was, let's see, the donkey was staring at, was the tree, and was used in the children's song. That was playing on the television, on the World Show, when I was there doing my mail, and the phone rang. I picked up the phone, and I turned and looked at the television set. Now, I know some of you are remembering this. I turned and looked at the television set, which was to my left, and I saw the children singing, and here was this tree on top of the sanctuary that I thought the Hylers had put there, the Kohans. Now, before that time, Eliah was using the paintings from the artist to try to put together this banner. And he was working on his computer using those paintings until I saw that, and he had been working on this donkey banner now since September the 20th, 2011, but could not get it right and couldn't get the clouds right. All of it was being corrected week after week, and of course we kept running out of time. I wanted a banner for the feast and hoping that we would get it right before we made the banner. I think it was October 1st when I made that call, but I'm not sure. They're not sure. We're going to check it out and make sure, try to anyway. Now, he agreed that on October the 8th, this was the Day of Atonement, he called and wanted me to look at a finished copy. I looked at it and I said, yes, that's it. And I approved it on that day, October the 8th, the Day of Atonement. The banner was ordered. We couldn't order it on Sunday. October the 8th was a Sabbath day. The Sunday, everything was closed. Monday was a holiday, so everything was closed at that time. So we couldn't actually order the banner until Tuesday, October the 11th. And the people, due to his pushing and shoving and insisting, they made this thing for us in one day. And we hung it that night, the night of the feast. Praise Yahweh. So the banner was ordered on the 11th. That was a Tuesday, because Monday was the holiday. And now get this. It was, now I don't know this date. I don't know this date for sure. Not sure about October the 1st. But the Sabbath before the feast, when I got through with my work, and I decided to go to the studio, this was all being led about for a purpose. The prophetic word channel was on. I sat at the table there to get my mail done, and that's when I saw it. That's when I saw this date. I'm not sure about the date, but we will get it, Yahweh willing. The children were singing. I was rejoicing to hear the song, this great commandment, and the children, they did such a great job of it, and the tree standing there over them. That's when I called both the Kohans and said, this is it. This is it. This was working on that particular banner. He said, no, Kohan Yeshua Hyler Hawkins was working on that banner. That Eliah told me this. So I called Yeshua Hyler Hawkins, and I said, remember, this was just a few days before the feast now. And the feast started on the 13th. That was the Feast of Tabernacles of this last feast. He said, I will start on this tonight. As soon as I told him that, he said, and I remember him saying that, I will start on this tonight and get it corrected. Then he showed me the copy on the 8th. The 10th was a holiday, so we ordered it on the 11th and got it out and got it hung. The company did it in one day's time. The banner was picked up the 12th and hung on that in the sanctuary after sunset while we were taking confessions on the 13th, which started the Feast of Tabernacles. The woman that spotted this new moon at the Feast of Trumpets. This is very important. I told you Yahweh was putting it in her mind. He had to, because she had to describe it to me, so she had it in her mind. On the 24th of December, after I said what I did about the tree being over the sanctuary was the cloud in front of the donkey, she called me and said, she told me and I told you that she saw the tree. This was on the 24th of December. She saw the tree, and that the Feast of Trumpets cloud that she saw that night that was placed in her mind by Yahweh, because she had to describe it. She said, that looks like the same cloud, that tree shape looks like the same cloud as that Feast of Trumpet cloud that I described to you the night of the Feast of Trumpets. Now, if you see what Yahweh did here in etching this into her mind, she was able to see that tree after I said, this looks like the cloud that I saw in front of the donkey. She said, hey, this looks like the cloud of the Feast of Trumpets, the night of the Feast of Trumpets. Gets better. So, when I was leaving the stage, Kohan Eliah Holler Hawkins told me when I was leaving the stage, I took pictures of the cloud at the Feast of Trumpets. And I'll try to find it, he said. He said, I think I still have that disc. That was on the 24th of December. Last Sabbath, that was the 31st of December. Last Sabbath, he told me, when we was leaving the stage, I asked if he had found it, and he said, yes, I did. I said, did it match? He said, I like to flip. He said, I had the picture of the tree in my computer. I found the picture of the cloud on Feast of Trumpets, the new moon. He said, I dropped it in, and it matched perfectly. Yeah. Now, this was last Sabbath. I found the picture, and it matched perfectly. If you can figure out by now what Yahweh put together here, you know, he first inspired the great Kohan Michael Sheets Hawkins to draw that tree. And he said he worked on this. He was telling me this morning that he had worked on this, seemed like for about a year or so, or maybe longer. He said the first one was back when we was at the press room in town. But he said this, he kept improving it and changing it and so forth till he came up with this one on that date that I gave you a while ago. And then, on the Feast of Trumpets then, he etches this into a person's mind that would tell us later, so we could go back and find it and actually see that Yahweh is the one that did this. Anyway, that right there you should remember. You should be very much encouraged. Let's turn over to Matthew 24, you should be very much encouraged about this, because Yahweh, we're getting to where now we're close enough to being like Him that they're starting to make contact with us. And that's what this is about, these signs in the heaven. If you look at Matthew 24 and verse 30 again. Now, he's speaking about this time period that we're in right now, and you saw the news how they're getting ready to go to the great nuclear wars, and they're going to make this the final one. Now, if you remember the plans, remember what Malachi Martin brought out in his book, The Keys of This Blood. You know, he actually tells there that the Catholic Church actually dates back to the Aaronic priesthood, and they're claiming that they are the Aaronic priesthood. I say so too, but they're not the priesthood of Yahweh. They are the ones that rebelled against Moshe, and of course they said, well, we're holy too. You know, you're not the only one that's holy. That was the beginning of their push to become the leaders in the world, which they did. And of course, they've come down till now, and Yahweh has allowed them. He said nothing will be restrained from them. And He's allowing this to take place. He's held it back a while until He could get us to a certain point and know for sure that we were going to stay in His work forever, and know for sure that nothing was going to get us out of this. And and that's the reason I said when I saw this, I said, I think you got it made. But I know that Yahweh is cut off from the world, and of course He doesn't hear sinners, but He's hearing us now very closely. He's answering us before we call now, and He's letting us know this. Well, here we see the Savior Himself talking about this time period we're in here, and telling about how horrible this is going to be. There was one of the articles that I saw that actually was describing this in that manner, and I thought then that the man, I wondered if he was listening to the sermons we've brought, but he was talking about we are at a very dangerous crossroads in our history. And then he goes into talking about the films that you saw here, the news, just a bit ago, where they're getting lined up and ready because they are assured that Russia and China and Pakistan, maybe some others are lined up with them to try to destroy the U.S., but they want to, with a first strike, try to take them out, devastate these countries to where they can't fight back. Now, this seems to be the scenario that the news analysts are coming up with. I only know what prophecy says. And prophecy shows there's going to be a third of man killed over that fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates, which includes that whole area there, Russia, China, all of them. This, in that fourth part of the earth, that includes them all. Well, the Savior was telling about this at this time. We're talking about a time when the people, and that's what the man said in this article, they're confused, they're bewildered, they don't know what is coming next, they don't know what to do to stop it, they don't know what to do to make things better, and everyone is scared. Yahweh says that they will kill them. Many of them will commit suicide for fear of what is coming on the earth. Now that's how bad it's getting at this time, and we see it in the news also. And the Savior was speaking of this and says in verse 21 and 22 that it's going to be the worst ever. There's never been a time like this before. and the earth will be mourning. And he says immediately after, in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give her light. This shows the nuclear burning that is going to take place, and the debris that scientists know will darken the sun. He also says here, in this time of mourning, when the earth is mourning, he says, and then will appear the sign of the Son of Man. I've often told you, this is not the Son of Man that you're going to see, but the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. In other words, he made it. He is actually alive and well, and sitting at the side of Yahweh's throne, the right hand of Yahweh, ruling, judging the house of Yahweh, as we're shown. Turn over to Hebrews, the 10th chapter, and he's showing us a sign that he is alive and well and ruling. I needed no coaxing to believe that. In fact, I said in the song the children were singing, I wrote, we haven't asked for miracles, and don't. We only ask for your righteousness and to be called by your name. We believe without seeing. All of that is in that song of praise to Yahweh. And in Hebrews 10, we see in verse 21, the high priest over the house of Yahweh. Now we know for sure we have a high priest over the house of Yahweh. We know for sure in verse 16 that he's teaching the same covenant that was made by Yahweh at the beginning with his people, the laws and prophecies of Yahweh. That's what we believe in. And the more you believe these prophecies and trust in them, the more you'll see the things taking place around you is actually prophesied, and Yahweh is leading us. Well, back here now to Matthew 24 again, he is showing us a sign, not the whole world, but he said, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. How much better could it be? A better sign than this with the donkeys that he says in Genesis 49, where Yahweh tells Yeshua, says in verse 1, this is the last days. That was what Yeshua is showing us in Matthew 24. The last days, verse 3, the apostles asked him, what will be the end? The last days, or the end of the ages. And he was describing the very situation that the world is standing in right now, getting all their ships and bombs ready to kill a third part of the people on that fourth part of the earth, but it won't stop there. Prophecy shows it will continue until every nation on earth, and that's what it says too, every nation on earth is going to suffer this plague that's coming forth from this 12 tribes. Plague that is described in Revelations 18 as sin and iniquity. Well, here now in Genesis 49 verse 1, he speaks of the last days, the last two words. I'll show you what will take place in the last days. Then he said, the scepter, the righteous scepter, as is described in Hebrews also as being the scepter of righteousness, is what he is to inherit. He inherited that. He lived by it. That scepter of righteousness. Now, what is being presented to him by his house right now is righteousness. And that is his glory. We are his glory. Yes. That's what he inherited there. The scepter of righteousness. And of course, this is what we will rule by. And this is what Yahweh is bringing about. The scepter will not depart from Yada nor the ruling staff from between his feet until he comes whom tribute belongs. Well, we are his tribute. Well, the world's tribute is taxes, of course. Taxes, and it's getting to be nonsense, they say. They won't stop raising the taxes. And they keep doubling the taxes and taxes. But that's not Yeshua's tribute. His is us. The righteousness of Yahweh, practicing the righteousness of Yahweh. That tribute belongs to Yeshua, our high priest, who is guiding the house to that perfection right now. And increasing your faith should be tremendously now. There's no way that you could see what has taken place and think that I could do this. There's no way I could form these clouds, you know, and he's not up there blowing smoke rings and doing this, you know. If you think of the power of putting that cloud there with a donkey and a cloud under it, and a cloud that we find out later is the same tree that one of our priests actually drew and didn't find it out until the Feast of Trumpets later. And then December the 24th or 26th, they tell me, I think this is the same cloud. Then we check it out, and sure enough it is. You know, this is of Yahweh. There's no other power could do something like that, brethren. You think about what it would take to put a cloud here and form words with it. Him sitting at the right hand of Yahweh in heaven, governing the house of Yahweh, and here he creates a perfect cloud. Clouds are made up of gases, of vapors. They move with the wind. So the wind had to be at his control too, for him to sit there, hold that in front of me till he could get an okie to understand what was going on. But he did. He held it there right in front of me till I could study the details of that thing and see what a marvelous sight that was. The same thing occurred here over the sanctuary again with the signs that our priests are still working on. But that was held motionless for quite some time till they could get it down, drawn. One of them had to run inside and draw it on a blackboard. The other one had something to write with and stood there and looked at it and wrote it down. Try holding smoke somewhere. Try getting it out of the house sometime. Now you can see the power he's got if you just think about it a minute. It's like telling the disciples, go down here and throw a hook in and a fish will get on it with a coin in his mouth. How in the world could he bring something like that about? Well, you're the only ones on the face of the earth that know this. You're the only ones that know how Yahweh actually created the heaven and the earth in 7 days. And mankind. And rested the seventh day. Created all of this in 6 days and rested the seventh day, creating the Sabbath. All of it together took 7 days to put together. If you had the power to put a sign in smoke, a smoke sign over the sanctuary, you'd have that power. And you're going to have it one day. Praise Yahweh. And notice obedience of the nations. That's his tribute. That's his tribute, not taxes. Of course, the tithe go to Yahweh. The second tithe go to you. The third tithe go to poor. They're all lined out. But his tribute is righteousness. It's obedience. And if you're not obedient to him, you're not contributing. You're not contributing to his job and his position as high priest over the house of Yahweh. If you steal from Yahweh, you're not contributing to Yeshua. But you, if you're doing this right and being loyal and obedient to Yahweh, that's what you see right here belongs to our high priest Yahshua. And the way he does this is he tethers his donkeys to the vine. That's him. The vine is him. I am the vine. He established that firmly. You're not the vines. He's the vine. You are the branches and the donkeys. Yes, a wonderful sight to see in heaven. And we're going to be there one day. And the colts, that's you, to the choice branch. That's me. And he will wash his garments with the white. Well, if I had that new translation, I'd tell you what that actually meant. But this right here shows you his power, shows you his tribute, what he is getting, what his reward is for this. And here he's telling us back in Matthew 24, verse 30, now, at this time of trouble, when all the earth is mourning, which all the earth is mourning at this time, you can see it for sure, and then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Appear, that sign. In Daniel, if you turn there quickly, Daniel, the 7th chapter, we see this is a prophecy that Yahweh... Now, Daniel was a very righteous man. He was very concerned about the 12 tribes of Israel and how they were fighting against one another. They were killing each other. They had formed separated themselves into nations and kingdoms, and of course they were all fighting one another. And he was weeping about it. He was mourning about it. And Yahweh showed him then his plan. His plan is shown in Daniel 9. Thank you. Oh, boy. That's what this holding up. That is beautiful. And thank you. I'm going to keep this. No, I'll get it back to you. I'll leave it at the north office, but that is beautiful. I love you too. In chapter 9, verse 24, it says, he showed Daniel the 70 weeks of years, and I brought this out in the book, The Mark of the Beast, I think, the first time. And he shows everything that's going to take place, including our Savior, Yahshua, Messiah, suffering death on the stake at the hands of the 12 tribes, killing him, murdering him. And then he shows the rest of it in a time period frame there, of course, being split up into other things. But go back to Daniel 7 here now, and look here at verse 13, because first off, he shows you the 4 kingdoms that would come out of this whole mess, all out of the 12 tribes. They would form a super kingdom, and Yahweh allowed them to do this. And of course, they're going to find out that their super kingdom still can't bring peace, because you have people inside this super kingdom that are willing to kill themselves to kill others. This is how bad the hatred has gotten. And it's still going on. We moved out of Iraq. It's still people are being killed with people bombing. There's no peace there. What did we accomplish? Well, we got the oil. We got contracts on all the oil. Hurt not the oil. Well, that's what we got. Afghanistan, there's nothing solved there. Anything solved in Egypt? No. Prophecy shows, I think it's Isaiah 9, shows what's going to take place with Egypt. And the commotion that's going on right there now, prophecy shows every bit of it taking place at this time. When people think they can bring peace by force, that's the reason police departments were created. That, and they saw the money in in police departments. Then the lawyers saw the money, and they trained, said, well, we want certain people to be lawyers only. So they limited this field to a certain amount and named all their daughters Sue. You know, Sue. Well, they should have anyway. The lawsuits, you know, they see the money, the big money in it. And of course, this itself brings oppression to the people and hardship. I see people, you know, I see they got a man stopped on the road that can't even maintain a vehicle. His vehicle is run down. He's trying to work, maybe got lawnmowers or something in it, and they're standing there writing him a ticket because he didn't have something, a tail light out or a stoplight was out or something. So they make it even worse than that on him. Next thing, he'll be losing his house because he can't pay his rent because he had to pay the ticket to keep from going to jail, or got thrown in jail and lost his job. You know, this is the oppression that comes with this kind of system. Instead of helping, it hurts worse. And this is what we see in Egypt when they kicked the king out. The king was protecting them from a lot of things, but they didn't know it. And of course, they did it at the advice of, as you know, the person who that is shown in Revelation 6 is supposed to be riding on a white horse. Well, of course, that's more the deception that you see, like Santa Claus coming down the chimney. White horse supposed to represent peace. It don't represent peace. The first thing he does is take peace from the earth. The Catholic Church, the Pope, the leaders of the kings of the earth, is saying we can overpower our enemies if we do it in this manner. So they're lining up right now, as Revelation shows, they're lining up to kill a third part of the people over a fourth part of the earth by nuclear activity, famine, and disease epidemics. That's what they're lining up to do, and they're going to do it. Prophecy says they will do it. Then after that, they still won't repent. Well, Daniel shows you these four beasts that came together into one. The fourth beast was the strongest of all, that took over the world under the leadership of the Catholic Church, becoming the Holy Roman Empire. The Pope said recently we need to recreate or bring to life the Holy Roman Empire again in order to solve these problems. It couldn't solve the problems back then. It was the cause of the problems back then. They had peace in Galilee. Those people kept the laws of Yahweh, and they had peace except when it was disrupted by this beastly system. Well, Daniel was showed all of this. Daniel was very concerned, and Yahweh said, don't worry, this is all under control. The same thing he told Eob. I have power to do this, and I'm going to bring it about. And Daniel believed that. Well, here now in chapter 8, you see the little horn leading the fourth beastly system that was put together by four leading powers. Now in verse 8 of chapter 7 of Daniel, you see these horns, and of course this is the same four horns that is represented by the four horns of the altar of death, where all the sacrifices was done by the trillions, and that, of course, is what we have seen from this system. Now, if you look on past this now to verse 13, he says, "And I saw in the night vision." From this system right here, he sees in the night vision. If you look at the last part of verse 11, you see the great burning, till they're destroyed with this great burning or burning flame. This is the nuclear wars that he's speaking of here, that he shows that this system that he shows him earlier here, the four beasts come together to form the Holy Roman Empire, and the great burning that takes place. It's mentioned in detail later by several prophets, including Revelations. And then he says, as at verse 12, concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their governments taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. Now, this is what's going to take place of the wars that are fixing to start right now. And we see them lined up for it. And then verse 13, he says, and I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. This is a vision now. It's not the real thing, but coming with the clouds to the Ancient of Days, and they were brought together before him. That is, his tribute was brought together with him. This was described in Genesis 49, 10, and 11. That's speaking of us. And there was given him ruling authority and glory and a kingdom. We are his glory. Don't forget that. The apostles said this themselves plainly. We are his glory if we bring forth the right tribute. That all peoples, nations, and languages, all that's left of them, should obey him. The government is an everlasting government which will not pass away, and the kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Now, this, you see here, one like the Son of Man, comes with clouds. Now, this was a vision, a prophecy. It was a prophecy. But the signs we are seeing now is in Matthew here, 24, go back there. The sign of the Son of Man being in heaven, we're seeing that right now. And Daniel shows us next what is going to take place with us, because we're going to be brought together with him. But right now, he's showing us it's near. And then in verse 30, then will appear, see the darkening of the sun in verse 29, the shaking of the earth, the heavens. Then verse 30, then will appear in this same time period, see, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, at the time when all the tribes of the earth are mourning. Now hold your place right there, and look to Luke 21. Luke 21. Hold your place in Matthew 24:30. Look to Luke 24:1. You got to put these two together. Luke 21 in verse 11. Now, Matthew 24:30 says, a sign of the Son of Man. And here we see in the last part of verse 11, sights and great signs from heaven. Great signs from heaven. If you put that together with Matthew 24:30, and there will be a sign of the Son of Man. This is a sign of the Son of Man from Luke 21:11, from heaven. The sign of the Son of Man from heaven. Made especially, brethren, for us in this time period. Sign from heaven. The Amplified Bible says great signs from heaven. I got to read you this. King James Version says, this is Luke 21 now, and here it is. Luke 21. Now, verse 7 of Luke 21 says, this is the King James Version I'm going to read you. It says, and they asked him, saying, Master, but when shall these things be, and what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? Because he was telling about the tribulation. This is a King James Version. He says, what sign will there be? Verse 7. Now, if you go on down to verse 11, the King James Version says, great signs shall there be from heaven. The Amplified Bible, remember, what signs shall there be? The Amplified Bible says in verse 11, there will be mighty and violent earthquakes, and in various places famines and pestilence, plagues, malignant and contagious or infectious epidemic diseases, which are deadly and devastating. And there will be sights of terror and great signs from heaven. It makes it just a little bit plainer. Now, verse 25 of Luke 21, King James Version says, and there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. The Amplified Bible says in verse 25, signs in the sun, in the moon, and stars, and upon the earth there will be distress terrible and anguish of nations in bewilderment. What do we see right now? We see it everywhere throughout the nations, in America too. And perplexity, he says, without recourses, with no recourse, nothing that they can do. We're left wanting, embarrassed, in doubt, not knowing which way to turn. At the roaring of the sea, the echo, and the tossing of the sea. In verse 31, it says, even so, when you see these things take place, understand and know that the kingdom of Yahweh is at hand. And of course, that's why the Yeshua is showing you that and showing you he's in control right now. He could totally surround us with a cloud, totally blot us out from any eyes of the world at all if he wanted to, and may do it. A pillar of fire is also mentioned for this time period by day, clouds by night, pillar of fire by day. Truly I tell you, this generation, those living at that definite period of time, will not perish and pass away until all has taken place. The sky and the earth, the universe, the world will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But take heed, he says, to yourselves, and be on your guard, lest your heart be overburdened and depressed, weighted down with the giddiness and headache and nausea of self-indulgence, drunkenness, and worldly worries, and cares pertaining to the business of this life, and lest that day come upon you suddenly like a trap or a noise. For it will come upon all who live upon the face of the earth. That's verse 35. It will come upon all who live upon the face of the earth. It's coming. There's no getting out of it. Let's see, that was 3. The secret here, and this is what Yeshua was proving to us, and what he wants to know is believing without seeing. Now, I put that in the song, and the children sang it. They said did a wonderful job. The miracles we do not ask for. Without seeing, we believe. Well, that's shown in Matthew 20 and verse 29. And we were given that opportunity, brethren, and we passed it. And of course, Yahweh and Yeshua led us to that point, led us to to the point of believing without seeing, showing that it could be done. Now, in John or Yochanan 6:29, also believe the one sent. This is believing without seeing. Believe the prophecies. Believe all that the prophets have spoken. Then you will believe the one sent. Believe Yahshua Messiah. That's in Yochanan 5:37. Yahweh the Father sent him. Sent him, and you've got to believe the one sent. Well, how was he sent? He is spoken of at the mouth of the prophets. That's Yochanan 5:37. Yahweh testifies on my behalf. How did he do that? At the mouth of the prophets. Yochanan 5:38. Yahweh's words not in you. Why? Not, notice, you better turn to that. Yochanan 5:38. Yochanan 5:38. Believing without seeing. That's where you stand right now. Believing the prophets. Believing the signs too. Believe the signs that he just showed us. Can't deny that sign. The way he fixed it and the way he brought it about. There's no way to deny it. And 5 and verse 38, he says, nor do you have his word dwelling in you. Well, why? Because whom he has sent, you won't believe. So if you get what he's saying here, Yahshua is saying to you, if you don't believe the one sent, you're not going to have Yahweh's words at all. You're in darkness. Unless you believe the one sent, you won't have Yahweh's words dwelling in you. That's where they come from, the ones sent. When people buck up against the one sent, when they bucked up against Yahshua or the prophets, they simply cut themselves off from Yahweh totally. Unless a person humbles themselves and submits and believes the one sent, they will not qualify. And he says that there in verse 38. It says it plain as day. Yahweh's words are not in you because you won't believe the one sent. Meaning, they must believe the one sent. Come to the one sent to get Yahweh's message. You must go to the one sent. There is no other way. Now that's the words of your Savior. Well, in Luke 24, verse 25, he says, turn there, got to show you one more thing. He says, you're a fool if you don't believe the one sent, if you don't believe all that the prophets have spoken. And that's what these signs are about. He's showing us, brethren. He's showing us he's here, he's watching, he knows exactly and is ready and knows how to protect you if you will submit yourself. In Luke 24, in verse 25, he said, fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for him to die? Then verse 27, and beginning with Moshe. Beginning with Moshe, yes, look at Acts now 3. Beginning with Moshe, in Acts 3:19, he says, repent therefore and become converted that your sins may be blotted out. And then verse 22, look at verse 22, for Moshe said to the fathers, Yahweh your Father will raise up a prophet like me, whom from among your brothers, him you must hear, him you will hear, in all things whatsoever he says to you, and it will be that everyone who will not hear that prophet will be utterly destroyed. That's the only thing that's going to occur. You're not going to go in another way. Anyone who won't believe the one sent, who won't believe the prophets who spoke of the one sent, for Moshe truly said this. Also, Isaiah 2, he says, in the last days I will establish my house. Hebrews 10, back to Hebrews 10 now. This is where we started. Hebrews 10, And here's the Savior showing us He's well aware of us. Hebrews 10, and look at verse 19. Hebrews 10:19. Therefore, brothers, having boldness to enter the most holy place by the blood of Yahshua, verse 21, who has become the high priest of the house of Yahweh. High priest over the house of Yahweh, verse 16, teaching the laws and prophecies of Yahweh. This is the only place on earth you're going to find them, by the way. Everyone else has rejected them. Teaching, and notice, teaching laws, turning you from sin. Back to Acts right quickly. Turning you from sin. Acts 3. Acts 3. And notice verse 26. Acts 3:26. To you first, Yahweh, having raised up His Son, Yeshua, sent Him to bless you. How? In turning every one of you away from his iniquities. That's the same thing we saw in Hebrews with Yahshua over the house of Yahweh, turning people from sin. Got that? Now look over to Zechariah. Zechariah, everybody. Now here we have Yahshua. We have the house of Yahweh, Isaiah 2:2. In the last days I will establish my house. In the last days, Yahshua, thither your donkeys to the vine, and then the donkey's coats, which are you, to the chosen branch. And in the last days, we have the house of Yahweh established. Here in Zechariah 6 and verse 11, take the silver and gold and make crowns and set them upon the heads of Yahshua. Yahshua, now it says sons of Yazidek, but that word means Yahweh. You find that in Strong. The son of Yahweh. Yahshua, the son of Yahweh. Of course. Now notice who is high priest. High priest over the house of Yahweh is what Hebrews said. Speak to him and say, this is what Yahweh of hosts says, behold the man whose name is the branch. Now, in Genesis, don't forget, Genesis 49, thither your donkey's coats, that's the last days, thither the donkey's coats to the branch. It falls right into place, doesn't it? Everything. You see it clearly? For he will branch out of his place, and he will build the house of Yahweh. He will build it, the one called the branch. In the last days I will establish my house. Yahshua will be high priest over the house of Yahweh in the last day. The branch is going to branch out and build this house of Yahweh in the last days. Yes, he will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory. He will sit and rule on his throne. He will be priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace will be between them both. That is, between the branch and Yahshua in the last days. And up over this house, and up over this land Yahweh has given us, that was actually dedicated to Yahweh, he shows us the donkey. And he shows us the cloud in front of the donkey, which represented the olive branch. The olive branch. And the donkeys, I got your attention, right? And that's what is shown there. The donkeys are in full. The olive branch has got the attention of the donkey that's carrying the load, that's getting the message to the entire world that would bring the nations to humble themselves to Yahweh. That's what's going to take place. After this is over, they will. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you!